Have you ever had that feeling, that nagging sense that something's just a bit off? Like, despite everything you're doing, true contentment just feels, well, out of reach.
Yeah, I think a lot of us feel that. It's this kind of quiet hum, maybe anxiety, maybe just dissatisfaction running under the surface.
Exactly. And it's almost like, as Tolle puts it, our normal state of mind, for most people anyway,
Yeah.
has this big element of dysfunction in it.
Right, a kind of collective blind spot, a really deep pattern that stops us finding, real peace.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're exploring Eckhart Tolle's really profound work, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose.
It's fascinating stuff. He pulls together ancient wisdom, modern insights,
Yeah.
and offers this pathway to, well, a different way of being conscious.
Our mission here is really to pull out the key insights for you. We want to give you a clear, detailed, accessible handle on what Tolle actually means by concepts like the ego, the pain body, and awakening.
Yeah, basically cut through the potential confusion, give you a shortcut to feeling informed about these big ideas without getting overwhelmed.
Okay, so let's unpack this pretty startling idea. First, our inherited dysfunction. Tolle says the normal state for most people is, well, dysfunctional, almost mad. What's he getting at there?
Well, what's interesting is how this idea echoes in so many older traditions. Like in Hinduism, you have Maya.
The veil of delusion.
Exactly, the idea that reality isn't quite what it seems, and even the mind itself is part of that illusion. Then Buddhism talks about dukkha suffering, or maybe unsatisfactoriness. It's seen as just part of the human condition, that feeling something's off.
And Christianity, the idea of original sin. Tolle reframes that too, right?
He does. He points out that sin in the original Greek just meant to miss the mark. So original sin isn't about being inherently bad, but more about living unskillfully, blindly, and causing suffering because of it. It points to a fundamental error, you see.
Okay, so that's the individual level. But Tolle takes it further, showing how this dysfunction scales up into, well, collective madness. The historical examples are chilling.
They really are. I mean, think about World War I. Millions died for what he calls a few miles of mud, using all these clever inventions, bombs, machine guns, but for destructive ends. He calls it intelligence in the service of madness.
Wow.
And then the 20th century, over 100 million violent deaths caused by humans, Stalin, the Holocaust, just staggering examples of this unconscious dysfunction playing out on a huge scale.
And the scary thing is, he argues those same basic forces, fear, greed, wanting power, they're not just historical, they operate in our daily lives too.
Absolutely. They distort how we see things, even in our closest relationships. They lead to what he calls misguided action, constantly trying to fill this bottomless hole. It's this craving driven by the dysfunction, and external things can never truly fill it.
Which brings us right to the ego. Tolle's core concept, he calls it an illusory sense of identity. That sounds deep. Break that down for us.
Right, the ego. Tolle sees it as the primordial error. It's basically our mistaken belief in a separate, false I. Einstein even called this sense of a separate self an optical illusion of consciousness.
An optical illusion.
Yeah. And this false I becomes the filter through which we see everything. It shapes all our thoughts, our interactions.
Wow.
Our whole reality reflects this initial mistake about who we think we are.
And one huge way this ego builds itself is through identifying with things, right? Advertising seems built on this.
Oh, completely. Advertisers are masters of this. They don't sell you things you need necessarily. They sell you things they convince you will enhance yourself. They're selling identity enhancer.
Like designer labels or fancy cars.
Exactly. The hidden message is, buy this and you'll be more you, a better you. It's like this magical act of appropriation, believing that owning something makes us more.
But that feeling doesn't last, does it?
Never. That's the paradox of consumerism, isn't it? The ego boost from getting something new is always short-lived. So you always want more. It fuels the cycle. And the whole idea of ownership, Tolle says, is mostly just a story.
A story.
Yeah, owning a skyscraper, for instance. It's just a mental concept, a story we agree on. But it has absolutely nothing to do with who you are.
Makes you think about people realizing that only at the end of their lives.
Right. That moment when they see nothing ever had anything to do with who they are. All the external stuff just falls away. And that connects to Jesus saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Tolle reads that as having no inner baggage, no identifications, just that simple, profound joy of being.
So it's not necessarily about getting rid of all your stuff.
Not automatically, no. The ego's clever. If you renounce possessions, it might just identify with being more spiritual than others or ascetic. The content changes, but the underlying structure, the identification remains. It's about not letting things define who you are.
Okay. And beyond things, the ego also identifies with the body. Our looks, gender, strength.
Definitely. Gender can become a really strong identity, forcing us into conditioned roles. And think about people who strongly identify with their looks or physical strength. When those inevitably fade with age, well, their whole sense of self feels threatened with collapse.
So the key is?
Enjoy the body, appreciate it, but don't equate it with the fundamental I. If you don't identify with it, its changing nature doesn't diminish your core sense of worth.
And what about the roles we play? Parent, doctor, artist.
Yeah.
These can become rigid identities too.
Oh, yes. When a function we perform hardens into a role we feel we have to play, our interactions become, well, less real, inauthentic, dehumanized even.
Tolle has a story about that, doesn't he? The Zen master.
Chazan, yeah. He realized he wasn't quite there yet as a teacher because his palms got sweaty when meeting a nobleman. He saw he lacked that sameness of bearing before all human beings. He was still caught up in social roles, reacting from the ego.
Which maybe explains that feeling some people get. I don't know who I am anymore.
And Tolle actually says congratulations when people feel that, because it can be an opening, a sign you're starting to see beyond the conceptual, mind-made definitions of self. Accepting you don't know can bring a peace that's closer to your true nature.
That really applies to parenting roles too, perhaps.
Very much so. That compulsive need some parents feel to control their adult children, often disguised as concern. Tolle sees it as the ego fearing a loss of identity as the needed parent and trying to manipulate others to fill its own sense of lack.
That reminds me of the Ram Dass quote.
If you think you are so enlightened, go and spend a week with your parents.
Yes, it's such a test, isn't it? The more shared history, the more present you need to be to avoid just falling back into those old, ingrained egoic patterns.
Okay, building on the ego, Tolle introduces another really key idea. The pain body. What is that exactly? The pain body, right? It's like this energy field within us, made of old, unprocessed negative emotions. Not just our individual past pain, but also the residue of collective human suffering, violence, oppression, all of it. It literally lives in our cells, he suggests.
And how does it operate?
When it gets activated, maybe by a specific event or thought, it can literally take over your thinking. Your mind just starts churning out negative stories, blaming, complaining, feeling victimized. It feeds on negativity. Tolle calls it an addiction to unhappiness.
Wow. And the media seems like it taps right into that.
Absolutely. He points to tabloid news, sensationalism. It basically sells negative emotion food for the pain body. So much news thrives on triggering fear, anger, outrage. He even mentions the collective female pain body, often activated pre-menstruation.
He even jokes about lawyers using it as a defense.
Yeah, like, my client's pain body was activated, Your Honor. It sounds funny, but it highlights how this unconscious force can completely hijack someone, leading even normal people to do harmful things without fully knowing why.
Okay, that paints quite a bleak picture of the human condition. But thankfully, Tolle offers the good news. There's a possibility for transformation, for awakening.
Yes, absolutely. The good news is that a radical transformation of human consciousness is possible. It's been called enlightenment, salvation, the end of suffering, liberation, awakening. Different names, but pointing to the same fundamental shift.
And the first step is just seeing the problem.
Kind of, yeah. Recognizing your own insanity, as he puts it, seeing the egoic dysfunction in yourself that's the arising of sanity. It's the beginning of waking up from it.
But haven't spiritual teachers been saying this for ages?
They have. People like Buddha and Jesus were like the early flowers of this potential. But Tolle argues their messages got mostly misunderstood, distorted, sometimes even woven back into the very insanity they were trying to end through rigid beliefs and institutions.
But the core truth is still there.
He believes so, yes. And he suggests that now a new spirituality is emerging, often outside traditional religions. It's less about what you believe and more about your actual state of consciousness.
Which leads to this idea of inner space that seems crucial for him.
Hugely important. See, most of us live totally absorbed in object consciousness. Our attention is always on things to do, things to think about, material stuff. Our minds are just cluttered.
Like Churchill's definition of history.
Yeah.
One damn thing after another.
Exactly. Tolle says to regain balance, to fulfill our potential, we need to develop space consciousness.
Okay, what's the difference?
Space consciousness means, well, you're still aware of the objects, thoughts, feelings, sounds, but there's also an awareness behind them. You're aware of being aware. It's like this alert inner stillness in the background. That's freedom from the ego, he says. It's the spiritual dimension.
Okay, that sounds good, but how do we actually cultivate that? How do we find this inner space in daily life? Give us some practicals.
One really direct way is perceiving without naming. Just look at things, listen to sounds, feel sensations, without automatically slapping mental labels on everything.
Like when you travel somewhere new.
Exactly. Your senses come alive because you're not constantly filtering everything through familiar concepts. So practice just looking, just listening, maybe to nature, or even just your room without the commentary. Notice the subtle calm that arises. That's inner space opening up.
And the breath. That seems almost too simple.
Simple but profound. Just feeling the air move in and out, the slight rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. It does two things. It anchors you immediately in the present moment, which is where inner space is found, and it helps you become aware of your inner body, the life energy animating you. It shifts you from mind identification to your deeper essence identity, a direct doorway out of the ego.
How can this help when we're just feeling unhappy or when that pain body kicks in?
Well, first, try not to say, I am unhappy. Instead, frame it as, there is unhappiness in me. See, it creates a little space. You're not totally identified with the feeling. And also, really try to separate your thoughts about a situation from the situation itself. The simulation, Tolle insists, is always neutral. Facts are neutral. I have 50 cents left is a fact. I'm ruined is a negative story, the mind adds. Facing just the facts is actually empowering. It brings you back to the now.
You mentioned an anecdote about someone named Ethel. How did presence help her?
Right, Ethel. She was really agitated, going on about some issue with property managers. Tolle just listened, didn't react, didn't judge, didn't offer advice, just held the space, essentially.
And what happened?
After venting for a while, she just stopped, looked at her papers and said calmly, "This isn't important at all, is it?" She had a moment of clarity, a brief satori stepping out of the voice in her head. His non-reaction, his presence, allowed her pain body energy to burn itself out without getting more fuel. That power of allowing is key.
That connects strongly to accepting what is, doesn't it? Which feels so counterintuitive sometimes.
It really does. There's that Zen story of Master Hakuin, falsely accused of fathering a child. His only response was, "Is that so?" He cared for the child. Later, when the truth came out and people apologized, again, he just said, "Is that so?"
Wow. No drama.
None. He was completely at one with what happens. He didn't personalize it, didn't resist it, so he wasn't a victim of it. This shows how the ego's relationship with now treating it as an obstacle, an enemy, or just a means to get somewhere else. That's what creates the suffering.
So our relationship with this moment is basically our relationship with life itself.
That's it, because life is always now. Past and future only exist as thoughts happening now. So the big question becomes, what is my relationship with the present moment? Am I fighting it, using it, ignoring it, or am I allowing it, accepting it? Making the now your friend, not your enemy, that's the path to freedom from the ego.
Okay, this leads us nicely into purpose. Awakened living. Tolle distinguishes between inner and outer purpose. Can you explain that?
Yes. Your inner purpose, he says, is primary. It's about being. It's simply to awaken, to become conscious. And this purpose is shared by all humans.
And outer purpose.
That's secondary. It's about doing. It varies hugely from person to person, raising children, creating art, building a business, whatever. And it's temporal. It changes.
So what's the danger if we only focus on the outer purpose? Achieving goals, helping people.
If it's not aligned with your inner purpose, with being, then your sense of meaning becomes unstable. It depends entirely on external outcomes. If your purpose is helping others, maybe you unconsciously need others to be worse off. If it's achieving, what happens when you fail? Your meaning collapses.
So greatness in the worldly sense is an illusion.
From the ego's perspective, yeah. Tolle calls it a mental abstraction, a favorite fantasy of the ego. Real power, he suggests, comes from honoring the small things of the present moment with your full attention. Like Jesus saying, "It is not I, but the Father within me who does the works." It's about letting a deeper intelligence work through you.
So how do we do things in an awakened way? How do we align the outer with the inner?
He talks about 3 modalities of awakened doing. Acceptance is the base, especially for situations you simply cannot change right now, just allowing them to be.
Okay.
Enjoyment. But this isn't pleasure derived from the activity itself. It's the joy of being that flows into what you are doing. You find enjoyment in the action because you are present.
And the third.
Enthusiasm. This is the highest energy. It often comes when your doing is aligned with a larger goal or vision that resonates with your inner purpose. It's like the universe is supporting your action. You feel empowered.
And he suggests a practice for bringing this into mundane tasks.
Yeah, like make a list of routine things you find boring, commuting, chores, whatever. And then next time you do them, commit to being absolutely present. Feel the aliveness in your body, sense the alert, alive stillness in the background. You might find the task transforms, becomes enjoyable just because you are present. That's how the new earth begins, more people making consciousness primary in whatever they do.
Now, New Earth, that phrase sounds potentially utopian, like we're waiting for some perfect future. But that's not what Tolle means, is it?
Not at all. He's very clear. Utopian visions are just more mental projections, more future chasing, which keeps you trapped in the ego. The new heaven and a new earth from the Bible isn't a future place. The new heaven is awakened consciousness arising now.
And the New Earth
is the outer reality that reflects that inner shift. It's arising within you at this moment. Remember Jesus saying, heaven is right here in the midst of you. It's about consciousness waking up from the dream of being lost in form and learning to create and experience form consciously, playfully, without losing itself.
And this awakening process, it doesn't always happen smoothly, right? Sometimes challenges or difficulties can actually trigger it.
Absolutely. He talks about the return movement, things like old age, serious illness, loss, tragedy. These events can crack the ego's shell, forcing a shift in perspective. That's why ancient cultures often revered elders. Their focus naturally shifted from doing to being.
Whereas our modern culture often dismisses the elderly.
Because we're so lost in doing, we often don't value being itself. But Tolle points out that major disruptions even earlier in life, childhood suffering, disabilities can sometimes lead to an early spiritual awakening, too.
He shares some personal stories about stepping into uncertainty.
Yeah, like walking away from his academic path with no real plan or moving without knowing where he'd live. But because he was following a deep inner impulse, aligned with presence, he says, everything fell into place beautifully. He even won a lottery that helped him finish The Power of Now. It shows that alignment can bring synchronicities.
But it doesn't mean everyone needs to make huge external changes.
No, not necessarily. For many, he says, only the how changes, not the what. You might do the same job, live in the same place, but how you do it, the consciousness you bring to it, is completely different. The quality comes from being, not just doing.
Okay. So we've covered a lot. From understanding that baseline dysfunction, the tricky nature of the ego, the pull of the pain body, all the way to the potential for awakening through presence.
Yeah, seeing how identifying with fleeting forms, things, bodies, roles causes suffering, and how recognizing that timeless inner space, that awareness, is the key. Bringing that awareness into our actions aligns our inner and outer purpose.
And remembering it's not about reaching some future state, but about deepening into this moment. Accepting what is, finding the joy of being right here.
Exactly. It's about shifting your relationship with the now.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe take away and reflect on. What if the greatest, most purposeful thing you could possibly do right now is simply to be fully present? Fully present with your next breath, the next conversation you have, the very next task on your list. What hidden power might that simple shift unleash, not just in your own life, but maybe in the world around you?